I figured it out. I figured out the Nolanwells timeline. I know how they messed with the GPS. I figured it all out. I figured out the lies that are based in truth. I figured it all out, and I've got proof. But stick with me because it's going to be a long video, y'all. Now, I found a 15-page Marine Patrol report that had lots of little details that prove that the boys had been lying. So I've already shown how at 1:30 in the morning, the initial Lieutenant Odom with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office said that his deputies spoke with several of the friends who traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan. And they said that he left in the company of an unknown female and that he chose to remain on the island.
So what was the next step? Did you guys ever engage with police? Or?
Yeah, so the first time I talked to the police was July 7th. I talked to the lead investigator, and I told him my whole story, top to bottom. Dot every I, cross every T. I told him everything I knew, every little detail.
Well, that's a lie now, isn't it, Warren? Because you talked to them at 1:30 in the morning that night. I mean, did you just forget to tell the cops about Katie? Because it's not like you didn't know it was her or you didn't know how to get in contact with her.
The girl that he was with, Katie, had texted somebody that she heard people yelling.
Correct.
Nolan yelling.
Yeah, and I have a picture of that. She texted my buddy, and the next day everybody was panicking. Everybody was texting Katie, because she was obviously seen with Nolan the whole day at the island. Katie sent a message to my buddy the next day and said, this last time I saw him, he's really sweet. But she also mentioned that the last time she saw Nolan was when my buddy was yelling at him to get on the boat.
But Katie says that she assumed that she went on the boat after y'all were yelling at him. And let's not forget that the last time you saw him was 3.
Well, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms.
And yet for some reason around noon, the name of another girl who hadn't even seen Nolan in a year was given to the patrol to go interview, saying that she was with that group, not Katie. They also gave the name of a couple of other friends who they weren't able to get in contact with. And despite having a picture of a text message from Katie, funny how you didn't share that with Officer Tatum. Probably could have cleared up some stuff real quick, right? Now let's get to the data. Now, at about 1:30 on July 5th, they were doing a flight of drones based on the relation of the last known anchor position of the Atkinson vessel, which I have documented right here. 4:30, Officer Strickland contacted Jennifer Pyrone, who was Wyatt's mother, who told them that he had already spoken to officers earlier in that day, but they were happy to cooperate with any investigation. And she let this officer take a picture of the GPS. Officer Strickland observed the track line showing Pyrone's vessel location on Horn Island, then gave coordinates. I'm going to need you to remember this exact phrasing. It's going to be important later on. Now, this was the GPS coordinates from the picture that the officer took, meaning that these coordinates had to be a different one that was verbally given over the phone by Wyatt. And you'll notice they're quite different. Now you'll notice that this incident report says the involved entities are Bart Edmington and Jerry Adkerson, not Wyatt. Even though Wyatt is 18, he should be on this report. And you could argue that they were just giving the names of the people that owned the boats, but somehow I doubt that 21-year-old Bart owns that boat. You'll notice on this report that 2 different pieces of GPS evidence were collected. So now we're going to go to the July 8th report where they came and they took those GPS coordinates from both the Adkerson boat and Bart's boat. Yellow is Bart, blue is the grandfather Jerry. The same Jerry that called and canceled the sea tow as the sea tow phone call was being made. Now, mind you, this is 3 days after the police had come and spoken to the mother and gotten the GPS coordinates. Now, Bart had a germane GPS map chart plotter. Jerry's boat also contained a germane GPS map chart plotter. Now, I had to look up the difference between waypoints, tracks, and routes. So waypoints mark specific spots. Routes connect them in a planned order, and tracks record your actual path. Now, according to that GPS data, there is no movement from 11 to 4:30, but we know that that's not true. Warren has never been able to logically explain how they ended up so far away from the shore. Because according to him, he said at 3 o'clock, that was the last time he saw Nolan, Bart was trying to yell at him to get on the boat. His brother got into a fight, so he got his brother to come over there. That's when he saw that it was all sinking, because he said this.
There's a lot of people on, so that it drags water in, and eventually, I think over time we were out there for a couple hours, the boat just started filling up with water. So I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater.
Yes, but according to Warren, he had just seen Nolan, like, neck deep, cradling a girl at the boat next to them. So how did they end up in 31 feet of water at the 4 o'clock call? There's an hour in between that. If the battery is submerged, how would they even get away from the sandbar? You can see in the background of this picture, they are far away from people. And yet this GPS is saying that you were stationary the whole time. But why? Especially because we have actual fucking proof right here. We have the coordinates that Wyatt's mom gave them the second time, and the cop took a picture of the GPS. Compare it to the GPS coordinates in which they were trying to get a tow from. But what if I were to tell you that not only does a waypoint need to be physically saved on this exact type of GPS, you have to intentionally say, mark this spot, or else it doesn't automatically save. It records your tracks automatically, but those are just saved coordinates. And it turns out you can actually delete tracks. It's super easy. You just go into the main menu and you delete it off of your data. So why is this GPS data, which is right here, so much further away than what the GPS says it is later? There is no data included in that GPS report that explains them going from here to here, unless someone went in and deleted those tracks. Because they probably dropped that waypoint once they anchored, which would explain why Warren said they showed up at 10:30 and the GPS says that they showed up after 11. And so then it wasn't until half an hour after the canceled tow that they dropped another waypoint. And mind you, the exact same GPS was used in both boats, and Wyatt/Jerry's boat has the tracks and routes where Bart's does not. And again, it tracks it automatically, so you have to intentionally delete those tracks. And why did they do that? Well, it turns out Jerry Atkinson just so happens to be the owner of Ocean Marine Group in Ocean Springs and Gulfport, which is literally a boat dealer. So guess who's gonna know that information? We already know Grandpa Jerry was in the mix, because the only way that he could have canceled the sea tow before it even started to head out is if Wyatt had called Jerry first and Jerry told him to call for a sea tow and then canceled it for him. Which would explain why he couldn't give any descriptions of where the water was. How high was it? We know that the sea tow did not bring in the boat. In fact, Bart's mother came on Facebook and said that there are pictures from my son's boat of the boat about to be towed, which is clearly who is about ready to tow them here, as Wyatt is on the phone. I can tell you 100% that this is not a sinking boat. You can see Bart bringing them in this picture. But Bart was supposedly the one yelling at Nolan to get on the boat, remember? Why would he be yelling at Nolan to get on a boat that's sinking? Unless he was telling Nolan to get on his boat. And Warren accidentally explained what really happened with the engine. Whatever happened with Nolan happened on Bart's boat, allegedly. Which is why all of Bart's information was deleted. So here's what happened. Both this one and this one confirmed that there was a fight that broke out on the beach. Started out with him, ended up with Warren's little brother. His uncle says, we gotta go. They hop on a boat and they leave. He grabs his drunk younger brother and says, we're getting out of here too. 3 o'clock. This whole caravan is trying to get the hell out of there because they're drunk and fighting. Wyatt's boat was in such a hurry that they couldn't figure out how to put the freaking trim down, which caused the motor to overheat, quickly stranded them, and Bart had to come help them. The time that Bart shows up, something has happened between him and Nolan. They're all distracted trying to fix the bilge pump because it didn't trim down. The waves were crashing over the boat and into the bilge pump, short-circuiting it. During this, some people have figured out that Nolan is gone. Other people just think that he's passed out or something, which is why Wyatt calls his grandfather to figure out what the F to do. And as the phone call is being made, more people are figuring out something's wrong with Nolan. That's why they didn't start moving again for 30 minutes. They were coming up with a plan and figuring out how to make it work.
By the time the boats were anchored and the group spread out across the sandbar, Horn Island was already packed. Roughly 300 people had made the trip out that day, many of them former classmates from Ocean Springs and the surrounding area. For most of the morning and into the early afternoon, Nolan was exactly where you would expect an 18-year-old to be on the 4th of July, in the water, in photographs, visible, present, and by all accounts in good spirits. Trace's Tin Shepherd, who was already on the island when Nolan's group arrived and had helped Nolan locate where to anchor, told ABC News he spent a significant part of the day with him. Nothing about Nolan's behavior raised any concern. He was socializing. He was photographed multiple times throughout the afternoon. People saw him. Around 3 p.m. that changes. Warren Hudson later told investigators and subsequently a podcaster that 3 p.m. was approximately the last time he personally laid eyes on Nolan. At that point, Nolan was with a young woman. Her name is Katie McCormick. She was 19 years old. By multiple accounts, the two had been together for a good portion of the afternoon, talking, spending time near the boats. Warren described Nolan as relaxed, in a good mood, even laughing. He said he looked at Nolan, shook his head, and kept moving. What happened in the next hour is where the accounts begin to diverge. Sometime in that same window, a physical altercation broke out on the beach. It started with one member of the group and escalated quickly enough that Warren Hudson says he had to physically intervene to pull his younger brother away from it. That fight, and the urgency to get off the island before things got worse, is part of what Warren cites as the reason the group began preparing to leave when they did. Traces Tin Shepard was also connected to the events around the altercation, according to accounts reviewed in the Marine Patrol report. The fight did not involve Nolan directly, but it created a chaotic, pressured atmosphere at exactly the moment the group needed to make decisions quickly. As the boats were being ready to leave, Bart Addington called out to Nolan. According to Warren and others present, Bart did not ask once. He called out multiple times. "Get on the boat. We are leaving. If you are coming, you need to come now." Nolan said no. His exact words, according to Warren, were that he was going to stay and get a ride back with someone else. Warren stated that at least 5 people standing near the boat heard Nolan say this. He was not in distress. He was not being held back. He made a decision, or at least that is the account that was given. Riding out with one group and riding back with another was not unusual for Horn Island. Warren stressed this point more than once in his interviews. People do it all the time. You go out on one boat, you come in on another. Nobody thinks twice about it. Katie McCormick was standing right there when Bart was calling for Nolan. She heard it. She saw it. And the following day, when Nolan had not returned home and the phone started ringing, she sent a text to one of the group members confirming exactly that. She was present, she heard Bart calling for Nolan, and she witnessed Nolan choose to stay behind. But here is where her account introduces its first complication. Katie also told that same contact that she assumed Nolan eventually got on the boat after everyone started yelling for him. She walked away. She did not watch him board. She assumed. That assumption, unverified, never confirmed, is one of the most important details in this entire case. Because the next confirmed fact is this. At 4:31 p.m., the boat left Horn Island. And Nolanwells was not on it. What happened between 3 p.m. and that departure is a window that has not been fully accounted for. The friends say Nolan chose to stay. The GPS says the boat eventually left. And somewhere in the space between those two facts, an 18-year-old's trail goes cold on an island with no cell towers, no permanent staff, and no cameras. At 4:31 p.m., the boat pulled away from Horn Island. Nolanwells was not aboard. That part is confirmed. What happened next is where this case stops feeling like a tragic accident and starts demanding a much harder set of questions. Somewhere around 4 p.m., before the boat even departed the island, one of the teenagers on board placed a call to Sea Tow, a private marine towing company. The call was recorded. Audio was later released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources to local news outlet WLOX. And when you listen to it, a few things stand out immediately. The caller reported that the bilge pump had stopped working. He said the boat was taking on water. He said, and these are his words captured on that recording, that they were sinking and needed someone to come get them. The dispatcher asked whether everyone on board was in good health. The caller confirmed they were. The dispatcher asked about the number of people on the boat. The caller estimated around 7. When asked whether any adults were present, the caller said nobody on board was over the age of 21. He also confirmed there were life jackets available. He then gave coordinates placing the vessel in 31 feet of water near the northwest tip of Horn Island. He provided a name for the Sea Tow membership account, Jerry Ackerson. That call established something important on the record. The boat was in distress. People were on it. They needed help. Then the call was canceled. Sea Tow released a statement confirming they never dispatched assistance. Before any tow could be arranged, the vessel owner contacted them and advised that Sea Tow was no longer needed because help had already been obtained. Private help. Arranged quickly. Before the tow company even had time to respond. Around 4:30 p.m., an officer from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources contacted Jennifer Pyron, who is Wyatt Pyron's mother. She told the officer her son had already spoken with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office earlier that day but confirmed the family would cooperate fully with any investigation. She gave verbal consent for the officer to view the Garmin GPS unit on the boat. Officer Strickland observed the GPS track lines, which showed the vessel's position on the northwest tip of Horn Island. Those coordinates were documented and would later become one of the most scrutinized pieces of evidence in the entire case. Now here is where this chapter requires you to hold two facts in your mind at the same time. The first fact, at approximately 4 p.m., this boat was reported to a towing company as actively sinking in 31 feet of water. The caller said they were going down. That call is on record. The second fact, according to GPS data later released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, after departing Horn Island at 4:31 p.m., this same boat returned to its original dock. It then traveled into Fort Bayou at approximately 5:52 p.m. It came back to the dock at 6:06 p.m. Then at 7:19 p.m. it made its way to the Fort Bayou boat launch, where it was placed on a trailer and transported overland to a residence in Biloxi. That is 4 documented movements after a vessel was reported as going under. No explanation has been publicly offered for how a boat with a submerged battery, a failed bilge pump, and water rising fast enough to trigger an emergency tow call was making additional runs across the waterway hours later the same evening. Warren Hudson later said the group had to run the boat fast to push the water out, and that they stopped in Fort Bayou so someone could get in the water and put the plug back in. That explanation was given in an interview. The GPS confirms there was a Fort Bayou stop, but it also confirms a sequence of movements that Warren's own account did not fully disclose, and that gap between what was said and what the data shows is something investigators did not miss. To understand why the GPS evidence in this case matters as much as it does, you need to understand how a marine GPS unit actually works. Because once you do, what is missing from Bart Addington's boat data stops looking like a technical glitch and starts looking like a decision. A Garmin Marine Chart Plotter, the type used on both boats involved in this trip, records 3 categories of data. The first is waypoints. A waypoint is a specific location that a user manually marks. You physically navigate to the device, select the option, and save that spot. It does not happen on its own. The second is routes. A route connects saved waypoints into a planned path. Again, this requires deliberate user input. The third is tracks. And this is where it gets important. Tracks are different from waypoints and routes because they require nothing from the user. The device records them automatically and continuously from the moment the unit is powered on. Every movement the boat makes is logged. Every change in direction. Every stop. The track builds itself in the background whether the operator pays attention to it or not. It is the closest thing a boat has to a black box. Now here is what investigators found when they pulled the GPS data from both vessels on July 8, 3 days after Nolan's body had been recovered. Wyatt Pyron and Jerry Ackerson's boat had tracks. The route data was present. The movement history was there. Bart Addington's boat had waypoints saved. But the tracks, the automatically recorded movement history that the device generates without any user action, were gone. Not incomplete. Not partially corrupted. Gone. For Bart's GPS to show no track data covering the period the group was on Horn Island, someone would have had to open the device's main menu and manually select the option to delete them. It does not happen accidentally. It does not happen because of a dead battery or a software error. On a Garmin unit of this type, deleting tracks is a deliberate, multi-step process. You have to choose to do it. There is one more detail that sharpens this considerably. 2 sets of GPS coordinates appear in the Marine Patrol report for this case. The first set was given verbally over the phone by Wyatt Pyron during the period when officers were gathering information. The second set was photographed directly from the GPS screen by Officer Strickland when Jennifer Pyron allowed him to view the device. Those 2 sets of coordinates are meaningfully different from each other. They do not match. That discrepancy is documented in the official report. It has not been publicly explained. Now consider who Jerry Ackerson is beyond the name on a Sea Tow membership account. Jerry Ackerson is the owner of Ocean Marine Group, a boat dealership with locations in Ocean Springs and Gulfport, Mississippi. This is a man whose professional life is built around boats, boat equipment, and the technology that operates them. He is not someone who would need to look up what a Garmin track is or how to remove one. He would know that tracks record automatically. He would know they can be deleted. He would know exactly where to find that option in the menu. It was also Jerry Ackerson who canceled the Sea Tow call before assistance was dispatched. As established, that cancellation happened with remarkable speed. For Jerry to have called Sea Tow off before they even began heading out, Wyatt would have had to contact his grandfather first, Jerry would have had to assess the situation and advise calling for a tow, and then, Either Jerry himself or someone acting on his instruction would have had to make the cancellation call before the tow company moved. That is a specific sequence of decisions made under pressure in a short window by someone who remained calm enough to coordinate it cleanly. None of that proves a crime. What it does is raise a precise and documentable question. If the tracks on Bart's GPS were recording automatically the entire time the group was on Horn Island, and those tracks are now missing, where did they go and who removed them? The official Marine Patrol report flagged the discrepancy between the two sets of coordinates. Investigators noted that Wyatt and Jerry's boat had track data where Bart's did not. Those observations are in the record. Whether they were pursued with the urgency they deserved is a question the family's legal team has been asking since the beginning. If this case matters to you, and if you have stayed with us this far, it clearly does. Subscribe to Unsolved Files right now. Every case we cover is one that deserves more than a headline and a closed file. Hit that button. We are not done with this one yet. At 1:30 in the morning on July 5th, while Nolanwells was still missing and his mother was already making desperate calls, Lieutenant Odom of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office documented the first official account given by the friends. According to that report, several members of the group told deputies that when they left Horn Island, Nolan was in the company of an unknown female and that he had chosen to remain on the island voluntarily. Unknown female. That was the language used in the official record. Not a name. Not a description beyond the vague outline of a woman nobody could apparently identify. Just unknown. The problem with that characterization is straightforward. By the time those friends were sitting across from law enforcement at 1:30 in the morning, at least one of them already had a screenshot on his phone of a text message sent by Katie McCormick. Her name was not unknown to the group. Her number was not hard to find. And what she had written in that message was directly relevant to everything investigators were trying to piece together. Katie McCormick was 19 years old. She had spent a meaningful portion of July 4th with Nolan on Horn Island. Multiple people in the group knew who she was, knew she had been with Nolan, and knew she had communicated with them the following morning. Yet when the initial report was filed, investigators were not given her name. Instead, they were pointed toward a different young woman entirely, someone who had not been in contact with Nolan in over a year, and directed to interview her as a person of interest in establishing Nolan's last known movements. Think about what that means operationally. Investigators spent time and resources tracking down and interviewing someone with no meaningful connection to Nolan's final hours on that island, while the one person confirmed to have been standing next to him at the moment the boat was leaving was not identified by name to law enforcement. Katie was not invisible. She was wearing a teal swimsuit and a white hat that day. Details captured in photos and video footage from the island that were later identified and circulated publicly. She appears in footage taken near the boats. She is traceable. The group knew exactly who she was. When Katie did eventually speak, the picture she painted was consistent with what Warren Hudson had described. She confirmed she was present when Bart Addington was calling out for Nolan to board. She confirmed she heard it. She confirmed she saw Nolan choose not to get on the boat. That part of her account lined up. But she also said something that opened a new set of questions. Katie told investigators and later communicated to members of the group that after the yelling and the urgency of the moment, she walked away. She did not stay to watch what happened next. She assumed Nolan eventually boarded. She did not see him get on. She assumed. That distinction matters more than it might seem on the surface. Every account from the friends rests on the premise that Nolan made a clear, deliberate decision to stay behind. Katie is the one witness positioned closest to that moment. And her account does not confirm he stayed. It confirms she heard him say he would stay and then she stopped watching. There is also the question of Officer Tatum. Warren Hudson, in his own interviews, referenced having a photograph of Katie's text message. That screenshot existed. It was in someone's possession the night Nolan was reported missing. It was not shared with Officer Tatum during the initial contact with law enforcement. It was not volunteered. Investigators were not pointed toward it. Why a piece of direct witness communication, one that placed a named individual at the scene during the critical final minutes before the boat departed, was not handed over immediately is a question that has not been answered publicly. The family's legal team flagged it. Independent investigators flagged it. And it remains, as of this telling, one of the more documented and specific gaps in how information was handled in the hours after Nolan went missing. What the friends knew that night and what they chose to share are not the same list. When you line up every verified data point in this case, the GPS logs, the CTO call record, the Marine Patrol report, and the statements given by the friends across multiple interviews, a specific picture emerges. Not a theory. Not speculation. a documented sequence with holes in it that the evidence itself identifies. Here is what the record actually shows. At 9:56 a.m. on July 4th, the boat departed a private dock on El Camino Real Road in Ocean Springs. That timestamp comes directly from GPS data released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. At 11:14 a.m., the vessel arrived at the western tip